The gas giant filled the lower third of the observation deck's viewport, amber and bruised ochre, cloud bands rolling slowly in the dark. I had been watching it for 3 hours. It was easier than watching the sensor board. My name is Mara Solis. I was 31 years old, 4 months into my first posting as a diplomatic attaché, and I had been told the assignment was ceremonial. A transit marker contact event, the briefing said. Standard protocol. Show the flag. Let the Kovari Dominion log our presence at the border. Go home. No one expected the Kovari to send a fleet. They sent a fleet. I heard it before I saw it. Or rather, I felt it in the way the crew around me stopped speaking. Lieutenant Wren, our comms officer, pressed one finger against his earpiece and went very still. Captain Adayeze Obi, standing at the forward rail with her hands clasped behind her back, turned her head 2 degrees toward the sensor alcove and waited. The Ardent Shore was a diplomatic frigate, 400 meters of polished hull and formal intent, unarmed in the way that mattered. We carried point defense, nothing that would mean anything against a battle line. We were here to be seen, not to fight. What emerged from the gas giant's shadow was not a delegation. They came in a wedge formation, 11 capital ships, and a screen of smaller escorts fanning out behind them. The geometry of it, clean and practiced, and entirely without ambiguity. Kovari Dominion Vanguard-class cruisers, their hulls the color of dark iron, angular in the way that things are when they are designed by a species whose architecture derives from predation. Sensor returns on our board lit up like a city. I remember the tactical officer saying, very quietly, "I count 43 discrete targeting solutions on us right now." He did not say it in alarm. He said it the way you read a weather report. Captain Obi did not move. I want to be precise about this, because it is the thing I have never been able to fully explain to people who were not there. The Kovari fleet came to a halt at approximately 8,000 kilometers. Their weapons were hot. We could see the bloom of their charging signatures on our passive sensors, hard and bright. Protocol in that situation, for any ship with self-preservation as its first priority, is to maneuver. To break formation, to generate lateral movement, to make yourself a more complicated targeting problem, or to power your own weapons in kind. To demonstrate that engagement would have a cost. Captain Obi did neither. She stood at that forward rail, and she did not move, and by extension, the Ardent Shore did not move. I watched her make the decision in real time, watched her hands stay clasped, watched her spine stay straight, and I understood without being told that she had understood something about this moment that I had not yet grasped. The Kovari had a file on every species they had ever encountered. We knew that from the intelligence assessments. Their doctrine was built on it: catalog, categorize, respond to what the catalog predicts. They had never made formal contact with humanity before. This was the first. And the first thing we showed them was stillness. The minutes passed. I counted them. 4, then 5, then 8. The targeting signatures did not diminish. The fleet did not advance. I kept my eyes on the sensor board because looking at the viewport, at the sheer scale of what was out there, at the massed weight of their firepower arrayed against one unarmed frigate, would have made it very difficult to breathe normally, and I needed to breathe normally. I was a diplomat. That was my job. At the 11-minute mark, Lieutenant Wren said, "I'm picking up encrypted command traffic. Kovari Fleet Band. Volumes, it's high. That's not routine. Leave it," the captain said. "They're arguing," he said, and then caught himself. "Apologies. I can't decode it, obviously, but the traffic pattern, the burst length, the frequency of exchange, it reads like disagreement." Captain Obi turned and looked at him, a long look. "How senior is the origin node?" Wren worked his board for a moment. "Flagship, the big one, center formation, and there's a return burst from the lead cruiser, the ship directly on our 12. It's not going back to the flagship. It's going wide. Fleet band broadcast." The room was quiet enough that I could hear the ventilation. What came next, I have reconstructed partly from the sensor logs and partly from what the Kovari themselves disclosed much later, after the political fracture had run its course. The commander of that lead cruiser, his name, transliterated, came out as something approximating Daon, and I have always thought there is a kind of poetry in that, had been given a direct order from the fleet admiral to advance and compel our withdrawal by force. The order was clear. The doctrine was clear. We were one unarmed vessel, alone, unmoving, at a border we had no treaty right to occupy. There was no military reason not to comply. He refused. He broadcast his refusal on the open fleet channel, which in Kovari command culture was not simply disobedience, it was a declaration. He was not declining an order in private, he was putting the argument in front of every captain in that formation, demanding they see what he saw. And what he saw, as he described it later, was a ship that had every reason to run, and had not run. A ship that had every reason to arm, and had not armed. A ship that simply held its position and waited, as though it had decided, with some certainty we could not account for, that the situation would resolve. He could not categorize that. His doctrine had no entry for it. A vessel without weapons that did not flee was not prey, and the Kovari did not have a word for what it was. He told the inquiry later, through interpreters, haltingly, that looking at the ardent shore on his sensors, perfectly still in the shadow of the gas giant, he had felt the first time in his career that his training had failed to give him a sufficient description of the universe. 4 cruisers followed him out of formation, then 3 more. The fleet admiral's flagship held position and continued to broadcast orders that fewer and fewer ships were acting on. We watched it happen on our board in silence. The flagship eventually withdrew. It took 40 minutes. The vanguard dispersed in the way that things disperse when the center of gravity has shifted. Not all at once, not dramatically, but with the quiet inevitability of something that has already been decided. The last Kovari ship dropped off our sensors at the 38-minute mark after Dayon's broadcast. We had not fired, we had not maneuvered, we had not said a word on any channel. Captain Obi unclasped her hands, placed them flat on the forward rail, and exhaled once through her nose. Then she said, "Lieutenant, log the contact event. Standard format." She turned and walked toward her ready room. Halfway there, she paused and looked back at the viewport, at the amber gas giant, now undisturbed by anything, at the empty space where 43 targeting solutions had recently been. She looked at it for 2 or 3 seconds. Then she went inside. I sat down at the attaché station and began the first of what would eventually be 14 formal diplomatic reports on that engagement. I did not know yet that Dayon would request human contact 2 months later, that his defection from the Dominion's command structure would pull 11 vessels and their crews with him, that the fracture he started on that fleet channel would take 6 years to fully propagate through Kovari politics. I did not know any of that. What I knew, sitting there in the quiet of the observation deck with the gas giant burning amber below us, was that we had just made first contact with a sovereign military empire, a species that had never lost an engagement by their own accounting, that had stood down the armadas of 3 other civilizations by simple weight of force, and what had undone them was a single ship that had decided not to move. I have thought about that often in the years since. The Kovari's doctrine was built on prediction. Show them a thing, they find the category, they respond. Every species they had ever encountered had confirmed the doctrine by behaving as the doctrine expected, by fleeing, or by fighting, or by negotiating from obvious fear. We were one unarmed frigate against a war fleet. The category was clear. We just didn't know what the category was, and so we held still. That is the thing the Kovari Dominion could not recover from. Not our ships, in the end. Not our weapons. The thing that fractured their command structure and pulled their vanguard apart was the fact that one human captain stood at a forward rail with her hands clasped behind her back and simply refused to be what their doctrine said we would be. I still think about the look on her face when she paused at the viewport. Not triumph, not relief. Just a woman who had known, from the first moment that formation emerged from the gas giant's shadow, exactly what she was going to do, and had done it.